All right. With that, um, we are going to bring on two of my very favorite people. And all right, there's Kyle. And I'm not quite sure how this works on the streaming. Um, so, everybody, two of my very favorite people. I've been preaching a lot about kind of taking care of your body. Says the guy here, up for 24 hours, not taking care of his body at all. I do have a lot of snacks, but that's about it. A lot of coffee. So, Kyle Crancher, trainenable.com. So, personal trainer, does a lot of online work, degree in psychology. We brought him into GMAT Ninja a couple of years ago just because we wanted somebody who could kind of help our students think about how to integrate exercise in their lives and how that would affect their performance. And we know that people who are unhealthy don't perform as well. We all feel that in our daily lives if we pay attention, but wanted to start thinking about how can we provide that more to our students and what kind of information we provide to people who are trying to be better and have their minds function better. So Kyle Crancher, our favorite personal trainer, and Shannon Glenn, sleep specialist. So there are ways to get a whole lot better at sleeping. One way is do not do 24-hour GMAT fundraising marathons. Apparently that's a bad idea. But something we see all the time, people say, and sometimes it's linked to anxiety, sometimes it isn't. Couldn't sleep the night before my test, did badly. Don't sleep in general, did badly. Well, I'm fine on 4 hours a night. That doesn't go well either. So, all right. So we've got about 40 minutes for this, which is awesome. So I'm going to start. I'll ask you guys just kind of some nice softball questions, and then if you're watching this live, please punch in your questions for Kyle and Shannon. Do my best to get to as many as we possibly can. Kyle, I'm going to start with you because I think the idea that there's a conversation about a very specific standardized test, and we're talking to an exercise guy, I think strikes people as kind of counterintuitive. And I would just love to hear your thoughts kind of from your point of view about, what it takes to get your mind functioning better and what kind of exercise helps, how much exercise, what do people really need if their goal is to maximize mental performance?
Yeah, I think what I experience a lot in my 10 years of coaching is that we tend to overcomplicate exercise in general. And if you're not dead on the floor, about to pass out at the end of your workout, you didn't do it right. But really what we're trying to do is just put ourselves in increasingly more challenging circumstances. So that way you get used to having physical and emotional, even mentally engaging challenges. So that when you're faced with it out of the blue versus planned, you know what this feels like, that you've had the experience and you've kind of been battle tested before. So I always say start with whatever you feel comfortable doing. And one of the most underrated versions of fitness is just walking, getting outside, making sure that you're getting a little actual physical separation from whatever task you were just doing. Like, I don't know, studying for 24 hours for a big test, something like that. It helps kind of get your blood flowing because your brain is obviously fed by, nutrients that can be pushed around by just some really gentle activity. So that's generally where I like to start people, is just do what you can with what you have right now. And I think everybody has the ability to just go outside and walk in the sun for 20 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And do you think that more intense exercise helps more? Like if somebody's just doing walking, is that good, but more is better? Does it depend on the person?
Yeah, I think there is some respect that needs to be paid to, I wish there was a better way to frame this, but like, have you earned the right to do more intense exercise? Because if I'm going from the couch to something super heavy or super intense for a long duration, that could very much be doing more damage than it is good. So I want to gradually expose myself to the right dose of intensity and duration. And that's all kind of dependent on, your exercise history, if you have any medical issues, what style of training you're doing. Because just take for an example, if you're an elite power lifter who is supposed to perform at 3 barbell lifts versus somebody who is training for a marathon, the way that you're going to perform at those two tasks is drastically different because your test is different. So the training really is built around your goals, basic lifestyle factors, your comfort in certain training methodologies. So I wish I could give you a better answer other than it depends.
Awesome. And Shannon, I'll turn over to you. Can you say a little bit about how, I think we all know, right? I mean, there's kind of I feel like I've been nagging everybody a lot in these 3 hours about kind of how to study and how to think about certain question types. I think sleep sometimes feels that way to us, right? Like we all know, right? It starts to feel naggy, get more sleep, right? Our families might yell at us. So I guess, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in our bodies? Like we know we should get more sleep, but how bad is it if I get 6 hours a night?
Yeah,
how bad is it? I feel okay.
Well, it's a good question. Before I answer that question, one thing, and just the few things that Kyle has said that I know, Kyle, you'll agree with me on, is that just how connected sleep and exercise are. And like everything you're saying, Kyle, actually helps you sleep better too. And I know better sleep also helps you exercise and move better. But like 20 minutes of outside time in the sun is probably my number one tip to adults who are battling insomnia. Because that there's so much research out there that says like the more you can move your body, ideally even with some sunshine exposure too, the better you're probably going to sleep. So just a few things that you said are so true when it comes to sleep. And same thing even going with people in different lifestyles and they have different sleep needs. So to answer your question a little further, Charles, on what does it look like? So recommended amount of sleep is 7 to 9 hours for all adults. Adult being considered like 18 to 60. Things do change as you get a little older. There is a very, very small, like less than 5% part of our population that can actually healthy function survive on 6 hours of sleep. But that's 5% of our population. So 95% of our population cannot do that. And that even being more specifically true to most of the people that you're speaking to who are studying for big exams, they're very likely going to be in a younger age group, 30 and younger, and their need for sleep is going to be even higher. So when you're functioning on less than 7 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep, as you mentioned, what starts there's a few things that start to happen. The brain gets hit a little harder, a little quicker, which again, kind of going back to studying and test taking is really problematic. Because when we don't get the enough sleep for what our body needs, big things don't happen, such as the toxins that our body just accumulates, our brain accumulate all day long. When we're sleeping, our brain has the ability to clean those out. And those continue to build day after day after day. And so if you're not getting the good sleep that you need, which means quantity too, right? Quality and quantity are sort of the name of the game when it comes to sleep. Quality they're both equally important. The right quality, the right quantity. And so when you're not sleeping enough, those toxins are continuing to build up, which can really cause a lot of problems for us. And big one is it can impair our cognitive functioning. And so what research has found is that if you are depriving yourself of sleep night after night, the cognitive impairment is equal to that of someone being intoxicated. For some people, they can experience that after a day or two. Also, kind of what Kyle alluded to, everybody's a little different. My sleep needs are different than Kyle's sleep needs. Kyle's sleep needs are different than Charles. And so when I'm working with people, that's one of the first things we really kind of hone in on is what works for you. Because I'm not going to say to you and hammer in your head 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, because I agree with you, Charles. I think that really can increase the anxiety for people around sleep and then make everything worse. A big thing I'm working on with people when I'm working with them privately is their mindset. Mindset plays a huge role in how you're sleeping. Meaning if you think you're a bad sleeper, if you hate sleep, you don't have, there's just negative feelings towards sleep, it actually makes sleep bad. And so that's the first thing I like to look at is how many hours of sleep do you actually need? And then we go from there. So for somebody like you, Charles, if you're like, I actually pretty regularly function fine on 7, then a night here or there is 6 hours, not like night before a test, not a good idea, but is it the end of the world? Maybe not. For somebody like me, I need 8.5 hours and I don't do very well on less. And so more than like one night of 6 hours, I really feel the effects of that because I'm cutting myself 2.5 hours short, which is a lot. And so the next day, my brain really, I don't feel on my game. And I don't feel like my thoughts can be jumbled a couple days of that. And my thoughts can really feel weird. And I can just not be as sharp or clear. All those things really important for test taking. And so cognitive function is something there's a lot of research out on that when you are cutting yourself short on sleep, you are not going to be thinking as clearly as you would be if you had gotten the right amount of sleep that you need. The other thing that can happen when you're not sleeping well is your memory. And there's a ton of research out there on memory consolidation. So when you're sleeping, what your brain does is it takes kind of all of your day's events and experiences and learning and says, this is important, this isn't. And so it takes those short-term, what happened today, memories and puts them into your long-term bank so that you can access them at a later time. And so if you're not getting good enough sleep, that memory consolidation isn't happening. And so it won't allow for you to put those memories into long-term to access later if you're not getting good sleep. I was actually just reading a research article the other day that was saying that, like, if a person, let's say a person has a test on Monday or Thursday, sorry, and they start studying for it on Monday, and they study every night, but they're only getting like 5 hours of sleep each night, they might as well have not even studied, because going into the Thursday test, the information that they should be retaining from their Monday night studying is going to be gone. The chances of them being able to access it are really small. And that's just from 3 nights of sleep deprivation. So that can kind of tell you how important the memory consolidation is when you're sleeping well. And obviously super important for every aspect of life. But if you're getting ready to prepare for something really big, like a big test, it is going to make a big difference.
And Shannon, just make sure I caught that right. So you're talking about research that basically shows that, in essence, the effects of sleep deprivation counteract the positive effects of studying.
Yes.
So whatever you spent that time studying is wiped out, maybe and then some, because your memory is so diminished and your performance is so diminished that the stuff you learn just isn't usable.
Correct. And it's not going to be just memory consolidation that you can't access. It's going to be your cognitive functioning too, right? Like they go hand in hand. And so not only will you struggle to remember it, you're also not thinking clearly. And for any of you that have had either experiences in your life, or in many of our cases, children, that when they're first born, you immediately get put into sleep deprivation. You know firsthand what that feels like. For some of us, that might be the only time that you've experienced that. I, for better or worse, have had jobs in my life that have had me up at night. I've had to work at night. And I remember, and I've never been able to do them very long term because I really couldn't get the shift worker lifestyle and sleeping down. And the next day I would just, or a couple days in, I would just be a wreck. I mean, I was like, I don't know what's up, what's down. I feel so confused.
I want to start talking a little bit about anxiety and kind of the connection between body and anxiety. And then we'll start taking some viewer questions. Kyle in particular, this number is kind of more from just anecdotal experience, working with students, that I think about 60% of GMAT test takers we meet suffer from pretty serious test anxiety, enough to affect their performance. I think it's kind of from your experience dealing with clients who maybe aren't taking a test or whatever, but maybe come in with some sort of, underlying anxieties or stress in their life. I guess kind of 2 questions. What do you see happening as they kind of get their exercise routine kind of optimized for their needs? Like what does that path to improvement look like? How long does it take? And what sorts of exercise regimens get them there to kind of alleviating that stress?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's helpful to get kind of like a working operation of what is an anxiety, right? So I've always explained anxiety as general worrying about something that hasn't yet happened, right? And with that, it takes place in the body in very like real physiological ways. You get cold sweats, you get the chills, you get jittery, you have increase in respiration, you might, like I said, start sweating and heart racing, you can't talk. All of those things are your body's fight or flight response turning on. So when you are starting to experience this onset of anxiety, it's useful to find strategies to dissipate this physical heightening of your senses kind of taking over. So when we go about producing an exercise program for somebody, first of all, we need to make sure that the base of the pyramid is solid, which is what we call our basic lifestyle guidelines. So how much are you sleeping? Like Shannon has been doing a great job of dropping some serious knowledge bombs on. What time are you going to bed at? Are you getting up at the same time? Are you having a good quality of sleep? Are you eating well, right? Because that's really going to prop everything else up, right? If I'm killing myself in the gym 7 days a week, but then I'm sleeping 4 hours, I might as well not have gone to the gym at all because I'm not giving my body a chance to recover. So when it comes to designing a program, we want to look at things that actually take place outside of the gym first. So once those things are kind of put into play, then we can start going about addressing the actual exercise portion of it. And that, like I said, really depends on what the person is currently doing, what they have done for exercise in the past, where they want to take their exercise. Because if somebody just wants to move for an hour 3 times a week, and they want to feel better generally with dissipating some of that anxiousness that they built up through the week, that's going to be very different than if somebody's like, I would love to play Major League Baseball, right? Because then you're shifting it from, I want to do this to feel good and just move my body because I can, and it's for me, versus I want to take the way that my body functions to now turn it into a career, and my livelihood is connected to my physical ability. So with that, again, the answer is it kind of depends. But generally, full body exercises 2 to 3 times a week, if somebody's doing nothing, is going to be plenty for them to see long-term progress. So if that answers your question, let me know. And if not, I'll go into that further.
It sounds like what you're saying, Kyle, is that it doesn't need to be, I think we kind of imagine like, hey, I need to go be a meathead and go to the gym for an hour and a half a day, 7 days a week. And I think the case you're making is that for somebody who's kind of struggling with their overall well-being and mental function and sleep for that matter, that maybe 20-minute walks 3 days a week, or, some like cardio or whatever it might be, even that much makes a difference towards sort of alleviating the stress and anxiety, kind of the buildup of that set of toxins in your body, and get your mind away from all of the things you're worried about with work and studies. Is that fair?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So we're not about like slapping a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and hoping that it sticks, right? So we're really trying to put in place long-term adherence, and that starts like very slow and incrementally giving you more and more to do. So just as an example, we have Johnny Boy who comes in and he's sleeping 3 hours a night, has maybe 2 meals a day that are like highly processed, and he wants to get into working out, going from no workouts a week to 5. Right off the bat, I would say, hey, where our focus needs to be for now is getting you more sleep. Once we've shown that we can get into a pattern and we can adhere to going from 3 to 4 hours of sleep to 5 to 7 consistently, you've proven that you're taking this serious. You want your well-being to be at the forefront of your mind. Now we can start layering things on top of that. So if somebody is anxious because of a test, there's plenty of things that we can do that is not study related that can help calm those feelings outside of that. And it's the same with exercise, right? Everyone is so hyper focused on what happens in the gym that they neglect the 23 hours outside of the gym that has a huge impact on moving us forward, arguably even more so than the exercise itself. Exercise is honestly maybe 20% of it all. But that's what's sexy, right? That's what goes on Instagram. That's what everybody shows. Like, look, I can squat 500 pounds. That's cool. But it's not as cool in, the eyes of the mass population. Like getting in bed at 9 o'clock and waking up at 6 a.m. every single day of the week, regardless of whether you can sleep in on Saturday or Sunday, having circadian rhythms, having your cortisol levels, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, mitigated by just getting sunlight through your retinas and getting sunlight on 50% of your skin for 15 to 20 minutes. It's little things like that. When they're all pointed in the same direction, you can make huge progress.
One of the questions that's kind of coming up is, almost everybody watching, I'm sure, everyone's trying to cram too many things into their lives, right? It's people trying to get their MBAs or studying for something. They all have intense jobs for the most part. how do you go about changing those habits and changing your schedule to fit this stuff in? And when should you study? So how do you balance if we're talking about, work, exercise, sleep, and study? How would you go about advising people on how to sort of figure out what that kind of optimal balance and schedule is? And going to start with Shannon on that one.
Yeah, great question. And also to talk what Kyle was talking about, a layered approach in making sleep changes is the way to go about it too. And so if you are a person that is like the example Kyle gave, you are sleeping, 3 hours a night. Yeah. Same thing that I'll do when I'm working with someone like that too, is like, I know I'm not going to jump you from 3 hours of sleep to 8 within a week period, because I'd have to throw so much at you to do that. So we're going to try to have quick wins, because our brains love those quick wins, and get some success happening, and then increase things from there. Makes a really big difference for sure. When it comes to the timing, and really the same would apply to what you're asking on when you're studying, thinking for ways to try to set people up for success. The recommendation on like finding the right time to study as it relates to sleep is to first think about your body clock. So there's typically 3 kinds of body clocks that most of us have. And that's an early bird or a morning bird, which many people know. Person who goes to bed early wakes up early. Then there's somebody kind of midday, which, can be given lots of terms. Most common one, if we're thinking on animal line, is like a lark. And a lark is somebody who's going to go to bed before midnight, probably somewhere between 10 and midnight, and then wake up mid-morning. So, waking up somewhere around, let's say 7 to 9 in the morning. So that's sort of your midday person. And then your night owl is typically somebody who isn't tired before midnight, and needs to go to bed after midnight and wake up a little later. Society does not necessarily cater very well to night owls, to be honest with you. So especially as you become further in your adult life. So that probably is the one that can be a little bit trickier, but by figuring that out, then what you're going to be able to determine is, when do I have my best period of alertness? When do I have the least amount of distractions? And what can I stay consistent with? And so from learning my body clock, then those 3 factors, what is the time that's right? So kind of, as you can imagine, an early bird is going to do their best studying in the morning. And something, like 5 to 7, 5 to 8 a.m. might be their ideal times. Now, if they're like, there's no way I can do that because I'm riding the train in the morning, it's crazy and chaotic, then we wouldn't even discuss that time, because that wouldn't set them up for distractions and consistency. So there's a little bit of a bigger range that a person could work with. So like an early bird would be early morning to probably sometime in the afternoon. Midday lark person would probably do better with like mid-afternoon studying would be best. Night owl is going to do better in the evening, is kind of the general rule. And so you kind of work with those, and then you go to the person. And really, as we're both alluding to, it is all very specific to the person, which is why some one-on-one work for people who are getting ready to do these high functioning activities really can make all the difference, because figuring out for that person, okay, here's what you're an early bird, but we can't get you studying at 5 o'clock because you've got this going on. So when can we do it where it still works with your brain functioning and it's still going to be consistent and without the distractions? So those are, and that really can apply to a lot of things, in life, on when you're at your best. Your body clock will impact and dictate a lot of that. And so those are things that I would suggest that people look at to determine when they're going to be able to study. And then the name of the game with anything in life is to try to be as consistent with it, more consistent than not, with it as you can.
Yeah. I have a saying when clients first come to me, is like, when, everybody wants that quick fix. When's the best time to work out? And I always tell them, whenever you can. Right. So when, you've summed it up great with, when are you going to have the most focus? When are you going to have the least distractions? When do you feel energized the most? And, you did a good job of laying out the archetypes of the different people that you'll encounter. And it comes with kind of a trial and error as well.
Mm-hmm.
You might try studying in the morning and you're like, this is just not working for me. The kids
Right.
are screaming. I got to take them out to the bus or whatever. That's probably not a good way to go. Like I
Mhm.
had one client recently whose compliance was so far down. And I reached out and it's like, hey, what's going on? It's like, I know we agreed on our Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday schedule, but Tuesdays and Thursdays are my long days at work, and I just can't get the workout in on those days. And I'm like, then put them on other days. If you are like the least likely to work out on your really heavy workload days, let's move them to another time. And he's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. It's like, yeah, we're trying to set you up for success, not for failure,
Yeah.
and like that's where the incremental challenges come into play, because if we go from 0 workouts a week or 0 study sessions, whatever you want to, use the example with, and then you jump from 0 to 5, the first week you don't hit 5 sessions, you're going to chalk it up in your brain as a loss. And it's like, why even try and set up that possibility to begin with? Make it 2, make it 1, make it 3, make it something that's achievable, but it's a step in the right direction. And then you use that momentum to continue on to other facets or to layer on top of that.
So don't make your goals too ambitious right from the start. In other words, do something that you know is attainable, you can feel good about, and start to build that kind of positive feedback loop.
Right. And one of the things that I try and like differentiate a little more through verbiage is like, think of your goal as like, it's huge, it's audacious. It's going to take you a lot of time to get there. You always want to kind of have that roadmap built out in a way, because you know where you're at right now, you know where you want to go. But then our objectives are smaller things along the way that keep us on track, but also they're smaller wins, right? So objectives, small, lead us to the big goal. Goal is something huge that you've been working towards or will need to work towards for a longer time frame.
And we're getting some really good questions about sleep and exercise and diet, and I want to circle back to those in a minute. But before we get there, there's been a bunch of questions about kind of variance on sleep banking, right? So if I get a terrible night's sleep tonight, which guaranteed, can I compensate for it later? So that's one version of the question. Related, what about napping? So what if I only get 6 hours at night, but I sleep a little bit in the afternoon or something? Is that okay, or does it need to be more consistent than that?
I'm guessing that question's to me. Good question. So again, going back to probably overriding point that we both agree on, it really does matter on the person. For some people, napping is really good for them and can be the difference in overall better sleep. For other people, it's the exact opposite. So really, there's kind of
napper myself.
Yep.
I'm like grumpy that I can't sleep more, so not in that way.
Yep. And so really there's kind of 2 ways to approach napping. When I work with a person, one of the number one questions I ask them is, are you a napper? Can you nap? Because naps can be there's a lot of advantages to them. And if I get an answer, just like Kyle said, most people know right away by the time they're adults, they know like, yes, napping is great for me. No, napping is terrible. I hate it. And so if I get a person that says they're terrible, then that's just taken out of the equation. It's just not a tool we're ever going to use. For somebody where napping is good, for myself, napping is good. And something that's really interesting, gender wise, women tend to be more prone to napping than men. We tend to have a higher sleep need than men as well. Women tend to have a higher sleep need than men. And so that's likely part of the equation, but just as a kind of disclaimer there. So there's two naps that have been researched, and 2 kinds of naps, I should say, that have been researched enough that are effective. One is the power nap, or it can be referred to as like a coffee nap. The other is like the traditional restorative nap. So a power nap is like a 30-minute nap that you're going to take to bring down the tired a little bit, and can be really advantageous or beneficial to do before something like taking a test, before something like a big like activity physically that you need to do. Because what's going to happen is you're not going to get into your deep sleeps. You're going to stay on the superficial sleeps. So you're going to pull out of it quicker, but it's going to lower the fatigue or the sleep deprivation that you're feeling enough to then be able to perform. And so basically the way power naps work is you lay down and you set an alarm for 30 minutes. And so you're not worried about what you're doing, whether you're sleeping or you're just laying there. Your body is resting. For most people, if a power nap works, they'll typically sleep somewhere in the range of like 12 to 17 minutes of that time. And those are ideal to try to do. We really don't want anybody sleeping like within 5 hours of bedtime. So you wouldn't want to do that, 5 hours before your bedtime. It would need to be a little earlier in the day, but those are something that people really can take advantage of if napping is something that works for them. The other nap is a 90-minute full cycle nap. Those are what are referred to as restorative naps. Most 18 to 60-year-old adults don't need those on a regular basis. But sometimes in the question that you asked, Charles, where you maybe really had a terrible night of sleep for whatever the reason, and napping is something your body can do, then a restorative nap might be a good idea. And usually doing those midday, kind of sometime after lunchtime, are when it's suggested to do those. Like well, I know there's people worldwide listening to this, but in other countries, not the US, America doesn't tend to support napping as much as other countries. But a lot of countries will have siesta time after lunch on a daily basis, where it's like you've just eaten lunch. Now you can just go have downtime, and it's not abnormal for them to just go take a nap during that time. That's because that's kind of ideal time for the body to do that is after lunch. A lot of cultures outside the US, it's also common to go to bed a little later and wake up a little later, like their society just does things later. And so then the nap even makes more sense than in the US, where that's typically not the case. So having nap being a way to make up sleep, it really only is if that works for your body. There's growing research out there on like, can you catch up on missed sleep? And the answer to that is becoming no. For a long time, we thought maybe you could, but could you feel like, if, for example, you staying up for 24 hours, within a few days, you're going to feel better, right? Because essentially you're going to get caught up or get back on track. But like, can you actually remove the hours of sleep deprivation and bring yourself back down to like neutral? Probably not. So that then brings the big thing on consistency. Trying to get as much sleep as you need and can on a more regular basis.
We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. I want to ask you so we actually plan to bring a nutritionist on in this panel as well, but she couldn't make it at this particular time. But I wonder if either of you have any thoughts on diet and exercise and sleep. And I realize that, Kyle, especially for you, it's like people with different physical goals. It's like, well, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder. Well, okay, that's one set of dietary needs. But for people who are exercising more for their overall well-being and their mental function, how would you like them to think about diet? What are the small changes that you think, let's say, most people would benefit from putting into their lives?
Yeah, I think a lot of what our society has kind of taken us away from is having consistency in our schedules. One day might be entirely different from the next. And within that, it's hard to get not only consistent meal times, but also meals that have enough nutrients to support the level of activity we're trying to sustain for long periods of time. So again, it's one of those, it depends answers. But if somebody is, trying to lose weight, it makes sense that we're a little more mindful of what we're putting into our body and the amounts. Just conversely, as if somebody is trying to gain muscle mass, you want to make sure that you're not under eating and you're having adequate fuel to make sure that you're gaining muscle or gaining mass in general. So I would say find some staple meals that are easy for you to whip together real quick or to meal prep. Meal prepping has changed my life because during the week, there'll be some days that I'm working for 10 to 14 hours. And when I go home at the end of the day, I know my likelihood of making a nutritious meal that I actually enjoy after being on the floor for 14 hours, that's not going to happen. So if I take a couple hours out of my weekend, let's say on the high end, 3 hours, but I've made 4 meals that I can dish out for not only lunches, but also for dinners when I come home on those late evenings. That's going to set me up for success to make sure that I'm not skipping any meals and starting off at a detriment. And also, just getting in some healthy foods.
Shannon, any thoughts on diet and sleep and kind of simple things that people can do to kind of help optimize their sleep by not making, let's say, major dietary mistakes?
Yeah, good question. So yes, for sure there is just as Kyle said, it can depend on the person, for sure, but making sure that when I'm seeing somebody privately, I do have them like give me a week food log so that I can just take a look at what they're what they're eating, and I say to them right out of the gate, like I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not here to put you on a meal plan or anything like that at all. But what I'm looking for is consistency in like how you're eating, what you're eating, and the timing of when you're eating, because those things will all influence sleep. And so with everything, our bodies like consistency. So with eating, it would be the same. And so is this person somebody that's eating consistently 3 meals a day? Is this food processed food, or is it actually, healthy food, plant-based food that is going to fuel the body? And then I also am typically looking at like sugar content too, particularly in the evening, because that's definitely not going to help their sleep needs. But sleep, just like exercise, is really it's a 24-hour thing, meaning like what you're doing during the day with yourself will totally impact how you sleep. And sleep is often a symptom of things that you maybe probably need to address more so than the sleep. And so diet, nutrition can definitely be one of those things. If a person's diet, is overly processed, or one client I actually very recently had, was just really rigid. Her diet was so strict in the foods that she allowed herself to have, that I was very concerned that she was undernourished. And that was potentially part of the issue too, that we needed to discuss, like based on the type of eating that you like to do, how can we incorporate a little bit more? And one thing that can be really helpful, especially for younger people, I'm meaning like under 30, 35, can be like a snack in the evening. And so we don't ever want somebody eating like right up to bedtime, because that's not necessarily great for our sleep. But if you're a person, let's say, that goes to bed at 11 and you ate dinner at 5 or 6, you probably don't want to go all night without any food. And then you're just going to go to bed. You probably need a snack a couple hours ahead of time. So I usually like to suggest, especially with men, like a protein snack, having that a couple hours before bedtime. Lots of research in that can help produce better sleep. So that's something that I usually suggest. Quantity does matter. I don't want them to go gorge a huge, gigantic meal. I want them to just have something light, because we don't ever want we don't want them to go to bed hungry, and we don't want them to go to bed super full. It's kind of that happy medium that you want people to be in, because that's going to promote the best sleep overall.
Awesome. Thank you both. So we are starting to run down to the end of our time for this hour. We're reading some interesting questions about kind of psychology and sleep, and kind of the feedback loop of insomnia and worrying about the test, stressing about that. I would love to get into that more with both Kyle and Shannon, because I think you both have interesting takes on that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but for anybody who's interested in some of the psychology stuff, hour number 10, we're going to bring on Dr. Jenny Foreman. She's a meditation coach, has a couple of doctorates, also a psychologist. So she can give us some of that stuff, not a sleep specialist, but can talk a little bit about how to kind of, what you need to do to kind of get out of your own head, and how mindfulness can help you do that and help you alleviate the anxiety. Perfect world. All these things work in tandem, right? You're taking care of your body, you're taking care of your mind in ways that go beyond the test. You're not just cramming through things like algebra problems, which is what we're going to do in another 2 minutes here. Before we go to the next hour, Kyle and Shannon, where do we find you too? So if anybody's watching this and wants to learn more about you, how do they find you, and what kind of work do you do with clients?
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
So you can find me at sleepwellsleepspecialists.com. I get people though that come to me who are taking prescription sleep medications, and they want to stop, and they know it's not good for them long term, and they know they need to get off of them. And so that can be part of my protocol too, where I'm weaning them off of that and bringing them to natural sleep. That's the ultimate goal, is to get my clients to the best natural sleep that's going to work for them, that they can maintain. It looks a little different with every client I work with, but ultimately that's what I'm trying to do.
Awesome. Yeah. You can find me at trainenable.net. So TRANANDABLE.net. You can also search that same name, Train Enable, on YouTube or Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all of those things. I'm even on TikTok, which I feel so old going on that app, but here we are. So my model is primarily working remote. So everything is app based. We'll do a series of initial consults to see where you're at, where do you want to go, what are some roadblocks that you've identified in your own life. Maybe we'll uncover some more through these series of consults. And then we'll put together an exercise program for you that's catered around your frequency of workouts, what equipment you have available. I'd say like 90% of my clients work out at home with whatever they have there.
It's awesome. I love it. Kyle, thank you so much. Kyle Crancher, trainenable.net. Shannon Glenn, Sleep Well Sleep Specialists. I put the links in the chat, but you can also find them through me. Come to gymninja.com, got their bios up. Message me, I'll put you in touch absolutely anytime. Thank you both so much for doing this. And thanks once again. NBA
you're very welcome. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys. We'll do it again.
Yeah, good luck for the rest of your time.
Thank you. If you have any ideas on how I can survive without sleeping, let me know.
That's not usually something I'm trying to help people with.
Bummer. Okay. Well,
okay. All right.
Y'all.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Take care.